everybody. Welcome to the Realist State. I'm Byron J, Elliott, your favorite realtor. We're glad you chose to join us today, where on this podcast, our goal is to have conversations that help us to base our thoughts and our perspectives in the real so that we can have a firm stance to be able to reach for the ideal. So, as you've seen over the last several episodes, we've been trying to get some move makers, some world shakers, to have conversations about what we can do to lift the level of living for our people, especially utilizing tools like real estate and financial empowerment, financial education. I'm super duper excited about our guest today. He's a living legend. He's a powerhouse. He's got such vision. He's got such the ability to help us go forward in the direction we think will be helpful for our communities and for really making our world a better place. If you would, real estate family, help me to welcome Dr. Owen Cardwell. Dr. Cardwell, it's good to see you today.
Good morning, Pastor Byron.
How you doing, man?
I'm doing well, man.
Good. I'm so glad to be able to have this conversation with you. And full disclosure for all of our viewers out there and all our listeners, we've tried this interview once before and we had some technical difficulties, but we're glad to have been able to work through it. And now we've got the legendary Dr. Owen Cardwell on the Real Estate Podcast with us. Now, Doc, just in case folks don't know who you are, I know who you are. I think of you as a hero, a living legend. But if you could just give the folks a rundown as far as who you are and what you bring to the table for this kind of a conversation, man. Would you help me to help them to understand some of the work you're doing and where you're coming from?
Well, I just retired last year from, this year is my 50th year in the pastoral ministry, and I retired from the church that I founded 25 years ago. I've been at the University of Lynchburg for the last going on 3 years now as the Roselle Schule Distinguished Professor for Education, and I co-direct the Center for Education and Leadership with Dr. Roger Jones. God's not through with me yet. There are some things in the works in terms of me going back into pastorate, but I'll keep that under cloak and shield until it's time to reveal.
Yes, sir. Wisdom. Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Man, it's an honor to be able to come alongside you with just this conversation because I have some background knowledge. I'm sure, it's old news for you, but it's still exciting for me to know that you, along with another young lady some years ago, were the one who integrated and who God set forward to integrate E.C. Glass High School here in Lynchburg, Virginia. And you were the first young man that looked like me to cross that threshold and get some instruction. How was that for you, man? How was that experience? How can you take us back to that time? Or help me understand it, feel it?
Well, interestingly enough, I just got a text message yesterday from Linda Woodruff's brother, Dr. Ed Barksdale. We in the Lynchburg area affectionately call him Ricky.
Yes, sir.
He's about to do a lecture, and he was asking me about the exact date. So it's been 59 years ago. It will be 59 years ago on January 29th that we desegregated E.C. Glass. And I don't lose sight of the fact that I've thought about it over the last few years or so, that the civil rights movement had a fairly simplistic agenda, access to education and access to public venues. The access to public venues really had to do more with an economic focus. So education and economics has always been that two-pronged focus of the civil rights movement. Our good friend and my mentor for the past 60 years or so, Dr. Virgil Wood, often says there is no beloved community without a beloved economy. So I'm mindful that these are the same issues that we are facing as we cross the threshold into the year 2021.
That's powerful, man. That some things that were going on more than half a century ago. By the way, you don't look much older than that yourself. So I think God's been kind over the years. He's allowed you to
God are good.
God are good to you. Yes, sir. Yes, sir. But to be able to see that lens back then, that I guess for my generation seems like, okay, so it's not in color on television most of the time. So it seems like it seems like many, many years ago. But to see someone who is contemporary to all of that, and be able to engage you in a conversation, especially in a place like Lynchburg, Virginia. So you find yourself now back full circle, having gotten your start here in Lynchburg, and now you're back. As you come back to town, man, I'm really interested in seeing or in hearing, what do you see? What is the outlook? What does it look like to you here? What is the social situation? What's the political? What does it look and feel like to someone like yourself?
Well, my mother continued to live here for a long time until she became totally unable to care for herself and had to move to Fayetteville. So I was coming back and forth to Lynchburg throughout the years, but it's quite different now, settling back in. And my first foray here, in a formal sense, had to do with me being on the Poverty Commission, which is Bridges to Progress. And I served both on the steering committee and as the chairman of the education work group. And Lynchburg was a relatively prosperous area when I was growing up. I mean, of course there were pockets of poverty here and there, but for the most part, people were doing fairly well. It stunned me when I came back here and found that the poverty rate is somewhere in the neighborhood of 25%. That when we talk about Black and brown kids in the school system, 90% of them are on free and reduced lunch. And of course, I see education as a serious means of coming out of poverty, but education takes some time. And so I've also been concerned about how can we work on the economic agenda and what are the things that we can do around economics that can help people out of this morass that we find ourselves in. So that's been sort of the focus of my work. And while I teach leadership studies at the university, Dr. Jones has encouraged through the Center for Education and Leadership that we engage the community to see how the university can be a real resource to the community. We've got a new president, and one of the things that she says, Dr. Allison Morris Shetler, is that she wants the University of Lynchburg to become Lynchburg's university.
I like that. I like that. It makes sense when you think about the idea of community building and community development, that we do it from, and we've had some of this discussion before, from an asset-based approach, right? So
absolutely,
using what we've got to get us on forward, and not feeling so insecure about what is within our own communities, what's in our grasp, that can be used in order to, and built upon to take us on forward. We've had now, just kind of piggybacking off of that in the conversation, I'm excited about exploring an idea. I've heard you pass by it before in light discussion, but I if we can drill down just a little bit now, I've heard you talk about some ways and some methods that we can come together in our communities, especially the faith community, and provide some resources and give some access to those trying to move forward, whether entrepreneurially or otherwise. Would you say a little bit about some of your thoughts there?
Sure, and your point about looking at building on what we have rather than lamenting what we don't have is really the crux and the basis for some of my thinking in this area. Back in, and see, this is part of our historical DNA. Back in the 15th century, West Africa, which is where many of our ancestors came from, the natives in the Western African countries and cultures developed something that was loosely called credit associations. The actual name that is used primarily in the Caribbean and in West Africa is Nsusu. Mm-hmm. They had these Nsusus that were credit associations, and even in the Atlantic Passage, these credit associations survived and primarily found their way into the West Indies, where you would see Caribbean cultures operate through these Nsusu. The idea is that, let's say you have 6 people that agree to participate in an Nsusu, and what they agree to do is that each one is going to put up $250 a month, and that of course 6 times 250 would be $1,500. Well, once a month, one person in that group would receive that $1,500. So twice a year, each person in the Nsusu would get the $1,500. Now, of course, those credit associations, those Nsusus, didn't have interest-bearing kind of processes. So I was thinking about that, and I spent the past 25 years in Richmond, Virginia, pastoring there. Actually, I said 25 years, I was 25 years at one church, so I was there probably about 30 years in Richmond. And when I first moved to Richmond, Consolidated Bank and Trust Company was there, a black bank.
Yes,
the president of that bank and I did some work together, but Consolidated went out of business in 2005. Of course, it was founded, as we know, by Maggie Walker. It was initially called St. Luke's Penny Bank. And when Consolidated was bought out by Premier Bank, which is now operates under Premier Bank, Consolidated had $90 million in assets. Now, Premier Consolidated still operates under that name, even though they're part of the Premier network in both Richmond and Hampton, but it's no longer black-owned. The last black-owned bank in Virginia was First Street Bank in Danville. That was bought out in 2017 by a former NFL player. I think his name was Casey Kaywood. He played tight end for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. So that was bought out. Interestingly enough, Apostle Lawrence Campbell was the chairman of the board for First Street Bank. That reminded me of our good friend who has passed on, Dr. Y.T. Walker, who, when he was pastor of Canaan Baptist Church in Harlem, was the chairman of the board of Freedom Bank. Now, when Freedom Bank went out of business for lack of loan capital, they had $102 million in assets, but it was not liquid assets. They had 2 branches in Brooklyn. They had something like 22,000 people that were customers, and I heard somewhere that for lack of about $10 million liquid asset, compared to 100 million plus that they had in asset, they went out of business. So that struck me. And so I began to research, and I found out that with the exception of maybe a couple of church-owned credit unions. And we don't have a Black financial institution in the state of Virginia other than Virginia State University runs a credit union. I think there's a First Calvary Baptist Church in Norfolk had a credit union. I don't know whether it's still there or not. And there might be one or two other churches that have credit unions. But think about it, Byron. I don't know how many Black churches we have in Lynchburg. Let's just say, for argument's sake, we have 100. And let's say that on average, they deposit $1,000 a week into some financial institution. Well, you think about that. That's $100,000 a week, $5.2 million a year that Black churches control in assets. So why can't we have a Black church-owned credit union in Lynchburg that operates, because that's part of our culture now, that's part of our cultural history, that's what we came out of. And so even if you took this Nsusu model and like I said, Nsusu didn't have this credit. Let's say that the person that got that $1,500 would now be charged 2% interest. It would be $3,000 over the course of a year because he'd get it twice, right? So let's say you charge 2% interest. So rather than paying $250 a month, they would put in $255 a month. That extra $5 would then go into a capital fund. And so at the end of a year, that person would have contributed $60 to the capital fund. You got 6 people, that's $360. So, but then let's say you got 300 people, then that becomes $18,000 because that's a multiple of 50. That becomes $18,000. Let's say you got 3,000 people, that becomes $180,000. After a while, you're talking about some real money that could really do something to bring people out of the financial crunch that they're under. And we would all be bearing some of the burden ourselves and helping our brothers and sisters and ourselves in the process. I don't see why that can't be done. It's been done, but for crises that hit these institutions. But we know that we have that history now. We can mitigate against that so that we can make this happen. Then I've been also looking at a bank that was created in Bangladesh by a man by the name of Muhammad Yunus. It's called the Grameen Bank. And it was created primarily to provide microloans, mainly to women in these third world nations. I think 97% of their customers now are women, or 97% of the loans that they've made are women. Grameen does have a Grameen America Bank in Brooklyn, New York. They actually have a branch in Brooklyn, New York. They have made something like $102 million in assets. I think they've got, let me see, I got the notes here about Grameen. They've got, it's more than that. They have an operating income of $100 million. They got $1.5 billion in assets. They made loans to 8.4 million poor people. This is worldwide. 97% of their customers are women, and they have a loan recovery rate of 90+%. So that's a good business model. So if you combine the Nsusu and the Grameen model, you might have something. And so I put the challenge out to my brothers and sisters that serve as pastors in our community. Let's have a conversation about this.
Yeah, sign me up for the conversation, Doc. Sign me up for that, because, you're talking a talk that reminds me of what our folks have had to do time and time again throughout history. And every now and again, it seems like every generation or so, we're lured back into a mindset that thinks that we need to depend on another source for the things that we need. And every generation, somebody has to figure out that no, our greatest resource is ourselves, and we can do some things from within our communities that will really make a difference. So now let me drill down. Let me see if I can make it exciting and make it live through the form of a question for somebody who may be wondering. One of our viewers may be wondering, and you touched on it a little bit, but what types of actual practical products would a local church-run credit union be able to offer to the community? What types of things do we have in mind? What types of products, accounts, loans, whatever?
Well, I'm going to answer that, but I want to instill a sense of urgency in this. I want us to understand. When I was growing up, I was a great fan of cowboy and Indian movies. In my later years, I've come to understand that I was probably pulling for the wrong crowd. But the way the movies would always set up is that you had these group of settlers in a wagon train, and they depicted Indians as savages, and so when the Indians would come, the wagon train would circle, and they'd be fighting off the Indians, and then after a while you'd hear that trumpet, da, 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 and the cavalry would come and rescue them. Well, I got news for you: the cavalry ain't coming. We have circled our wagons, and the cavalry ain't coming. We have got to be able to forge our own way. So the kinds of services that could be offered is you don't want to do this predatory kind of lending that these credit companies do. You want to do the kind of lending that builds assets. So micro loans that would be directed towards small business development. Grameen sets a ceiling of a $2,000 loan. Now, that might not sound like a lot of money, but I think of this woman that I knew in Richmond who really knew how to bake some sweet potato pies. She'd make it smack your grandma now with her sweet potato pies, so the word got out, and she found herself baking more and more pies, and finally she moved out into a little storefront and made all of her money around Thanksgiving and Christmas, the holidays. But we got a model right here in the greater Lynchburg area, the Woodruff Cafe and Pie Shop.
That's right.
So a couple of $1,000s in a micro loan to get a business like that moving brings assets into a single mom's house who has a capability, has a gift that she can now monetize to be able to help along. You can provide loans for education. Things that are going to build assets for you. You don't want to be lending to people to pay their electricity bill and that kind of thing. You want to encourage, you also want to use this credit union to encourage savings, even if it's $5 a week. I mean, $5 a week over the course of a year might not sound like a whole lot of money, but I know people that $250 can make a big difference in an emergency.
Yes, sir.
So, and the $5 might not hurt them so much. They just have to stop getting that pack of cigarettes every week, or whatever it is that that saps up that $5. But so we want to encourage savings. We want to make loans that build assets. Those are the kinds of things that I envision, because the idea is that we want to use this as an instrument to help bring people out of poverty, not to maintain their poverty status.
Yeah, man, that's an exciting thought to try and envision for a place like Lynchburg, because what we're seeing now in seemingly record numbers here locally, you've got young folks from within historically disadvantaged communities who are taking the leap of faith, especially in recent times, during the COVID crisis, the pandemic, and all of this. People are becoming very, very creative, and I've seen small businesses popping up all over town. I've seen them launching out, and it would be awesome for us to create an institution right inside the same neighborhoods in the oldest, and I would argue the strongest institution in our neighborhoods. That is the faith institution. That is the church. Being able to stand as a resource and then help not only those individuals to achieve their goals, but like you mentioned, to be able to offer microloans even to small businesses to get up and running, to be able to really see some daylight that they otherwise would not have been able to see. In other words, moving people from a hustle mindset into more of a business and a sustainable mindset, moving from the realities, and striving for a more ideal.
Absolutely. And you see, and we can achieve this if we don't care who gets the credit for it.
That's the key, huh? That's the key.
Absolutely.
That's the key. So it sounds like to me, Doc, and it takes someone like yourself that has enough wisdom, enough seasoning, been through and has seen enough seasons to be able to moderate such a conversation without the need to be affirmed or titles and these things tend to mess us up. And I'm excited to be able to come alongside you and learn. We've had the opportunity to hang out. Let's switch up speeds just for a second. I'm going to take a pause for the cause. I need to remind the Real Estate family of a couple of things. Hey, Real Estate family, right now, I don't care what you're doing, you need to like this video, share this video, subscribe to the channel so that someone else can hear and benefit from conversations like this that we're having with Reverend Dr. Owen Cardwell. Like it, share it, subscribe it, do it now so that somebody else can benefit. All right, we're going to get back to our conversation with Dr. Cardwell. So now, Doc, you recently, you mentioned that you've recently relocated back to the Lynchburg area, and that's my opportunity to take put a cheap plug in there. For anybody else who may be watching, we can help you to identify your next home. We can help you to find where you're trying to go. We can help you sell. We can hook up with you. Byron J, Elliott, eXp Realty. We had the opportunity, we had the honor of coming alongside the Cardwells to relocate and reposition themselves from the Richmond area back into the Lynchburg area. How was that transition? You mentioned what you saw on the social landscape, but how was the transition itself, and how has that been for you, man?
Well, see, I've been married now for 34 years, and I learned that if you want a happy life, you need a happy wife. And so this was not going to happen if Elder Flora Cardwell was not satisfied. She had told me one time that she was not going to move to Lynchburg because she felt like I had too many connections here and she couldn't figure out what she would be able to do. But God opened the door for her to be selected as the Director of Human Resources for Lynchburg City Schools, which gives her her own identity. And then, of course, that meant that we needed to find some place to stay. And you and Letitia, Lady T, were not only very gracious but professional and made sure that Elder Flora Cardwell was happy. We looked at several different places. We settled for this little place that we have on the hill now, and she's happy with it. So I encourage those of you that are looking for a place to use the services of Byron J. Elliott and his lovely wife. They're not going to be satisfied until you're satisfied. But this was, of course, we have a home in Richmond, Virginia, that my wife helped to build, and it was a dream home, so she has no intention of selling it. And so we needed something that was going to be good enough so that should we decide at some point in time to really retire and perhaps go back to Richmond, that we would have property that was good enough to be an investment piece. And so that this property satisfied a lot of different needs that we have. And so I thanked you too before, but I want to thank you again in front of your audience.
Oh man, Doc, it was an honor. It's an honor to be able to, just help in the transition. And that gave us some wonderful time to kind of walk along. I was able to pick your brain along the way about some of these wonderful conversations we're having today. And so, man, I'm excited to have someone like you come to town, not only in your role over at the University of Lynchburg, and not only so that we can explore some of the things regarding the credit union idea or that concept and really bringing some life to that, but to know that there are partners even in ministry who have the mindset and the heart for the people, I think is a breath of fresh air. There are some awesome pastors right here in town, but it's awesome to be able to have someone like yourself come into the mix and really bolster us up a little bit. I appreciate it. And Dr. Cardwell, I wish we could keep this conversation going forever, but I know how YouTube and the audience is. So what we're going to do is make sure we have another conversation real soon, maybe an update.
All right.
Where we stand on some of the things we've talked about today. Doc, if there's one last thing you wanted to shoot out there for people to remember and to have in mind, and also how they can get in touch with you, what would it be, man?
Well, let me take care of the latter part first. I can be reached through my email address at Cardwell_OC@lynchburg.edu. That's Cardwell_OC@lynchburg.edu. And I'll be happy to respond to any emails that I get. And if we need to have further conversation, we can make that happen. But I'm reminded that we've had a really interesting, tough year in 2020. And I was reminded just a couple of weeks or so ago that in the Chinese and Japanese language, the word crisis and the word opportunity are the same word. The same word. And I think it was Rahm Emanuel, President Obama's former chief of staff and the former mayor of Chicago, who said, never waste a good crisis. And so in the midst of this crisis, there are all kinds of opportunities. You just have to deal with it like you do an avocado, just peel back the leaves and find the sweet meat in the center, because a better day is ahead.
Yes, sir. That brings hope. And again, I thank you so much for taking time out of your busy schedule to hang out with us today. And we're going to make it happen again, Doc. We're going to make it happen again real soon.
Absolutely.
Yeah, excellent. Hey, Real Estate family, that was a powerful, powerful conversation. I don't know if you realize what you just heard and what you just experienced, but I'm hoping that you'll take the opportunity, again, to like it, share it, subscribe to the channel. Give some feedback in the comments section. If you have any questions for myself or for Dr. Cardwell, I'm certain we wouldn't mind engaging with you and helping us to get started. Again, if you're looking to do anything in real estate, we can help. And most of all, let's pull together, especially on a local level, to do the things that we can to raise the level of living for the generations that have yet to come. But most of all, wherever you go, whatever you do, make sure you remember